For this section, we are preparing the plackets for the bib section. So this has already been pressed, this first one, and we're going to do the second one on camera so you can see. You can use, because this is a very precise part of this pattern, you do have to be very accurate in your seam allowances, and this is a 1 centimetre, and you can use the little gauge for you to make sure that this is 1 centimetre, and this is where you do need to be really quite particular. So I'm going to move this over. We have notches. You can see we've got a notch here, and we've got our 4 notches on either end of our placket. So you're going to turn this over and edge to edge, the 2 outer edge, and you're just going to run the iron tip along the outer part of, if I just move that out the way so I can put this on an angle there, and then you're going to press there, making sure that the 2 outer edges are beautifully aligned, and then running down there like that. Okay, so then we're going to open this out, and then the next section you're going to, that's your little notch there, that you're going to pull this over, and again it's a 1 centimetre, and it has to be a 1 centimetre. So there, now you can use, like I said, you can use that gauge if you wanted to, but I'm just going to turn that over, and my eye, and that's going to help you, that little notch there, to turn that over, and it's joining up the 2 notches from one end to the other. And you have the second notch there, can you see? You have that first one which has just been ironed out, and that second one is to help you to know that when you're turning that over there. For this next step, we've laid out the pattern pieces for you to see, because we will be flipping over the placket onto this part of the bib, and we're going to be putting the 2 right sides together there, and we're going to be aligning. We've popped a pin there so you can see the 2 notches line up like that. So you're going to be pinning the notch, and then you're going to be pinning the top part of the placket there, popping a pin, and then you're going to go down to the bottom, and you're pinning your top and bottom and your notch in the middle, and then running a few more pins, making sure that your outer 2 edges are nicely aligned like so. So you're running from here down to the bottom. When it comes to the second side, because when you do the same thing, you're flipping the 2 over, you're then going to turn this around, because you will be machining from the bottom part of the placket. So again, align your bottom and your top and your notch there, and then run some pins again in between to make sure all the outer seams are nicely aligned, and you will be machining from the bottom up to the top. So don't forget, you wouldn't have an overlocked edge at this stage, because by mistake we overlocked it before the next step. So we're moving on to, you would have stitched down your placket at a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and so here we've already done one to show you what we're looking towards, and then we're going to flip this over here, and then you will be ironing, gently press your seam towards the placket edge. Now a little tip here, which I've just literally thought of, this, you've got a notch here. Now if you want to place a little pin there, because sometimes when the iron comes in you could accidentally press out that notch. So you're running your iron down here, making sure that you're not creating another crease. You're doing a lovely pulling this out and making sure that you're not pressing that placket crease that you put towards there, and pressing that nicely. So when I turn that over, you can see you've got a lovely stretched out seam and you haven't got any awkward. And then you're going to flip this over and do a lovely little creased placket. And you are not stitching this, so this is, we're just showing you here, this is your two lovely pressed plackets ready.
But now what you need to do is you need to go and open this out, and even open that folded edge out, and you're going to overlock this whole raw edge. So just make sure when you overlock it that that seam is still facing that way and you're not accidentally overlocking it that way, and that you're not overlocking that over. That needs to stay open. So on this side, it's better to run your overlock from this side of the fabric, from the top going all the way around, because the seams will naturally face the correct way.
We've now stitched the bib to the front with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then we press the seam towards the shoulder, as you can see. So now we're going to pin this front to the back, and you can see that there is a notch on the back which is going to align with the seam there, that your actual stitching line that you've actually just stitched. So we're going to maneuver there, and you can pop a pin straight through there so it's lining up with that notch. I'm going to move this out the way so you can see it a bit more clearly, and then we're going to marry up our necklines and pop a pin, and then our shoulder seam, move that out the way there. Now this is a very movable fabric, and you might be working with something similar, so don't be afraid to pop some, don't be afraid to pop lots of pins in to help you and marry up there. I'm kind of moving it with my fingers there. And you could pop another pin in here to stop that seam flipping up as you're machining. So you're going to machine from the shoulder to the collar, and then a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And then this is the finished there, that we then overlocked it and then we pressed it to the back.